Well, welcome to America's Hope. Joining me now is my guest, Dr. Joel Freeman, and he is the founder of the Freeman Institute, but he's a couple of other things too. He's an author, he's a producer of music and film, and he's also an historian who has actually helped create a curriculum called 365 Black. We'll talk about that. Joel, what else haven't you done? I mean, you're also a minister. You've been a chaplain in the NBA. Where do we begin? I know. Let's begin with your recent project, your latest project, Hurricane Bigotry. What is that particular song that you've written and produced all about?
Well, a number of years ago, I was able to speak at the National Laboratory, LANL, and it's a laboratory down in New Mexico. And I spoke at their event with Martin Luther King. Goodness, this is probably about 10, 12 years ago. And so what happened is that after I spoke, I talked about how when a person has a moment when they realize that because of the color of their skin that the rules are somehow different for them. I had a gentleman come up to me afterwards and, was very elegantly dressed, and you could tell he was at a very high level at LANL, a national laboratory, and Los Alamos National Laboratory. And so then he began to share the story. And then what happened is that he talked about how when he was a young man, something happened in his life. And he explained it to me. He said, from that moment on, he said, it was like this hurricane force wind came against me. And he said, I learned as a young man how to lean into it and retain my equilibrium. He says, I developed a dark sense of humor. I rose very high in the military and then in the DC government. And so he said that I just learned how to navigate with this wind. And of course, wind gets a name at a sustained speed of 75 miles per hour. We call a hurricane, Katrina, Andrew, and so on. And so what happened, he then said, he says, I got a tour in Japan. I had to go there, Japan. And what happened is that the moment I got there, the wind stopped. And he said it was weird. He says, I almost lost my my ability to function. He says it was just almost like too good to be true. Now, a sidebar in here, if you're Korean in Japan, the winds are at about 150 miles per hour. And so what happened is that he then shared with me how about 3 weeks later, a delegation came from DC. They went out to dinner, and he says, Joel, wouldn't you know it? He says the wind started picking up again around the table. And so what happened, he said, he then looked at me because I was getting ready to get in my car and go to Albuquerque and fly back to Baltimore. And it's about a 2.5 hour drive or so. And he looked at me and he was I guess you could say no BS kind of guy. You get what you get with him. And he looked at me and he said, you've received compliments, I've received compliments. This is probably one of the greatest compliments I ever received. He looked at me and he said, for some reason, I don't feel any wind coming from you. And it was almost like he was surprised by that. And so what happened is we just, talked a little bit more, and I got in the car. And you know what, Kelly? I just started crying. There were a couple of times where I had to pull over because just hearing that and just saying, and I made a commitment to God at that point in that trip home back to Albuquerque to get the flight to BWI. I just committed to God. I said, I don't want to be a sponsor of the wind to anyone in my family, at my place of worship, my neighborhood, on the job, anywhere, on a plane, at a restaurant. And if I do, not when, or not if, but when I am sponsor of the wind with someone, I want to be man enough to actually tell that person, or if there's 5 people, all 5 people, hey, I screwed up, I messed up, and I apologize. And that was, I think, a seminal moment.
It's a powerful song. I've seen it, and you have a blues version and a rock version. but the lyrics are very, very strong, and it addresses the issue of racism in America, but it also addresses the hope that we have in overcoming our racial divisions as well as our political divisions. The reason I wanted to get you on the show, Joel, is that you're also a thought leader, and you're an historian. But you're as a young man, you came to America, and many people looking at you now would not realize that you were once a hippie. And
That's true.
somehow, from your hippie days, you turned out to be a guy who became very productive, including going on to become an NBA chaplain. Tell me your story. A Canadian who comes to America and finds a purpose-driven life.
Well, I had a conversion experience where I turned my life over to the Jesus of the Bible in September 10th, 1972, right around a little after 10 o'clock that night. I signed up for school, Bible school, the next day, school that no longer exists. And but I went through 3 years of school of education there. I ended up, you've seen the picture of me as a hippie. 7 years later, I became one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA, as you mentioned. I spent 20 seasons, and probably the greatest miracle of all was that I survived 6 coaching changes and 3 GM changes. And that to me was very surprising because when a new coach comes in, they clear the deck,
Yeah.
and they bring their own people in, which I don't blame them for at all. It's all a part of survival and thriving with a team and the team chemistry. So then I was a pastor for 18 years. In 1993, I decided to take my pastor's heart into the business world. I started the Freeman Institute and traveled to over 55 countries, worked with heads of state and their senior advisors, leaders of multinational corporations, a lot in the independent school, that whole group of people all around from Africa to Asia to Central America to Europe, all around the world. And so then it was about 6 years ago that Dr. Walter Milton called me, and he said, "Hey, let's do a Black History curriculum." And I told him later, "You had me at hello. Let's do this." And little did I realize all of the challenges that would come with 2.5 years working, researching, writing, editing, rinse and repeat, do that 12, 16 hours a day. We both put our very successful businesses on the shelf for 2.5 years. No guarantees, no promises from any school district in the country that said, "Hey, you do this and we'll buy it." And so it was a huge, huge risk just from a business standpoint. My wife thought I was crazy, and she was 99.9% right. And then she later joined on as the this is the result.
There it is.
A 5.5 pound book, 1,248 pages, 1,200 QR codes, over 2,500 images throughout. And it starts in ancient Africa, ends in Canada, and now we're in over 400 school districts across the country. And
Wow.
it's become just an incredible, I just can't explain it, the way that this has been received.
Joel, what's stunning to me is the success of your book at a time where people are banning books. I mean, you bring a lot to the awareness factor of what happened in American history, but you don't. It isn't a book that diminishes the growth and the greatness of America. If anything, it enhances it. How did you and Dr. Walter Milton, who's an African American man, how did the two of you realize that you were actually embarking on something at a time when people were condemning such books about Black history, and you were able to escape people even having any hint of criticizing this book because it was done so well?
Well, when you're in a jar, you can't read the label, and so we couldn't read the label. We thought we were doing pretty good stuff and a lot of research, and talked to a lot of people, an advisory board of people that were informing us along the way and informing the content. But what happened is we kind of wrestled with how are we going to deal with issues that have vexed our country for centuries. And if I could use this hand as an example, a metaphor, if you will, the thumb represents I guess you could say, uncomfortability and things that, Uncle Tom, 3/5 of a human being, reparations, should we tear the statues down? Can a white person ever fully understand the black experience in America? And so the first is to invite people. We're talking about parents. We're talking, because it's a whole system, parents, educators, administrators, students, and clergy, and all kinds of individuals. So the first thing is inviting people to connect with, to become critical thinkers, then to become compassionate listeners, then to become fact-based, respectful communicators, and then finally to become action-oriented solutionists, all connecting with uncomfortability. And that whole schema and process, for some reason, people on the left and the right love what we're doing, because it's all about being solutionists, and it's also being about truth-centric. We're not grinding an axe. We're not bending the arc toward one particular party machine or the other, one philosophy or another, and we're just sticking with the truth. And if someone has a problem with the truth, so be it.
So be it.
Welcome to our world.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you mentioned it so well, truth-centric, and you defined it so well. Look, this book, it has a lot. You talked about the codes in there so that children can actually go in and then have an interactive study in addition to the material that they're reading on the particular subject that they're studying. It also has music. You have a Grammy award-winning music producer and artist, and he's contributed to this. Talk to me about the role that Ko has played in this.
Yeah, Dr. Kevin Ko is his stage name, but Ko Cates. He was a super producer. It's just an amazing, over 33 million albums that he's participated that were a part of his production. And when he saw this and heard this, he said to Walter and I, he says, I'll do a song for every single chapter. There's 41 songs in all, along with an anthem that is called Black is Beautiful. So they are so good that many have said this could be the next Hamilton on Broadway, and that's something that we'll be addressing sooner than later. But he has a doctorate degree in music education, and I've had rap artists that have listened to the lyrics and said, I could not do something like that. I would get too involved. So it's kind of like a journalist. You've been a journalist for years. You've been in some very tough situations, and you have to kind of suspend your emotions at a time when you're seeing someone in desperate trouble and just report the facts. And he said that's what he had to do when writing a song about lynching or anything else in the throughout the book, the Civil War issues, and it just somehow it's like a whole nother genre of hip hop, rap music that he has devised and developed, and it is extremely. The lyrics were sponsored by the content of each chapter, so it's like an anthology of American history. And hence the whole idea of doing possibly a Hamilton type show in Broadway.
That would be fantastic, first of all, because the book is just that good and the music is just that great. Look, I got to ask you, this book, for the students who have been reading it, as well as the teachers in those 400 schools, what are they saying about its content?
Well, these school districts, some school districts have 1,000 schools in them, and so it's just an enormous impact this is having. And the response we're getting, I'm still waiting for the shoe to drop. It's just an amazing thing to see the response. And I think it's the reason why is because we didn't become political in this. We didn't run toward one side or the other. In fact, probably the worst thing would be a politician from the right or the left holding this up and saying this is the answer for whatever they want it to be the answer for, on the right or the left. Because we're such a divided country, everyone, 49% of people on this side or that side, would then say, oh, something must be smelly about that book, something must be wrong. So we've been very subterranean, very careful about even the media we go on. We've turned down more media than we've accepted simply because of that. We want to be more subterranean. So even in Florida, the very day things blew up about a year and a half ago, I guess, that very day, Dr. Milton was meeting with over 500 school principals, who became very excited about this. And now we're in Miami-Dade, a huge contract with them, West Palm, and some other places I can't talk about right now. But it's just incredible. I can't,
Yeah.
it's just God's favor. That's all I can say.
It really is incredible, and like you said, it's favor, but it's also the fact that you were truth-centric, and you have raised the bar on what a history book should be like and what it should include, so that children are not going home feeling guilty, but children are going home feeling empowered and inspired, and say, "Mom, guess what I learned today," and being able to share that without offense. But like you said, if the truth offends, then so be it. Look, there's so much I want to talk to you about, Joel. You've done so much, so I want to take a break. When we come back, I'd like to talk to you about going back to your NBA days and how that inspired you on this journey, a journey that you have likened a white man's journey through Black America. I find that so fascinating, and I love how you've put that together. Let's talk about that next on America's Hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Dr. Joel Freeman. He is the founder and owner of the Freeman Institute. He's a successful entrepreneur, a business leader, an author, a man of faith, and being a pastor. He's a former NBA chaplain for the NBA Wizards in the Washington, D.C. area. So, Joel, let me take you back to those days, because you were this young kid, young man working in the NBA with all of these star athletes playing for the National Basketball Association. They're making millions of dollars in contracts. You're serving as their chaplain. And did they trust you? How did you gain their trust?
Well, you can imagine, on a scale of somewhat suspicious to extremely suspicious, we're banging on this end of the scale, extremely suspicious. I mean, they're looking at me like, I'm supposed to spill my guts to that guy? You got to be kidding me. This white guy from Canada. And so what happened is I just knew some basic things. I had no mentor, and I was just a young kid, 25 years of age. I didn't know what I was doing. I was one of the first 2 or 3 chaplains in the history of the NBA, so they didn't know how to deal with me. In fact, later I was on a flight down to Dallas to speak, and I looked over, and there's Bob Ferry, who's the former general manager. And he says, "Hey, Rev, how you doing, man?" He says, "Come on, let's talk." And then he gets on, and I think he was doing some scouting for his son, Danny, who is, I can't remember what team he was with at the time. He says, "They're putting me in first class, and when you get a chance, come up, sit next to me." And so he was quite excited about that, because he comes from the old school days where no first class. And then he began to share with me, because I asked him, I said, "What were you thinking back then?" And he looked at me and he says, "I was afraid of you." And I says, "What? Are you kidding? I'm just a young kid. What are you afraid of?" And he says, "Well, I didn't know what you're into, and you could be talking about, hey, all this is spiritual, and winning this game is nothing, and blah blah blah. All these different weird type of philosophies and ideas." So he says, "What I did is I came up to the office, the place that you were speaking in." And he says, "I put my ear up to the window, or not the window, but the door a few times, just to hear what you were saying." And he says, "And if you're saying anything squirrely, I was going to come in and grab you by the scruff of the neck and haul you out of the arena, never to return again." And so I said, "I'm glad you didn't tell me back then. That would have freaked me out." But he said, "I kind of liked what you were saying." And he said, and so, developing a rapport, it cannot be fake and phony. You can't read a book about it. Can't go to a seminar about it. It has to come from the old ticker here. That's just be there, to be unconditional love. I mean, there's things that I know about guys that I will go to my grave with. I haven't talked to my wife about it. Nobody. And that's just the way it is, because that's just the way it is. It's got to be. And some of the guys, what they do is they, because their position in life attracts a lot of insincere people. They sometimes don't know for sometimes 7 or 8 years what the true motivation is of a person that's coming, has been their friend. Is it trying to get some money from me? Is it so they can say that you're my friend? What's going on? And so that was a challenging thing. And I to this day, I have no formula for it. All I know is I never asked for money. I always offered to pay genuinely. I just didn't lift one side of my body pretending like I wanted to pay. I was genuinely ready to pay,
Yeah.
and uh, and just made myself available, and never demanded from them. Never tried to bring in get rich quick schemes or anything like that. It was just loving them as unconditionally as I knew how by God's help.
And Joel, these players, though, they challenge you to learn their culture. Most of these players were African American men, and they would even challenge you, saying, "What do you know about my life and my culture?" How did that
Oh
challenge
yeah.
you to go out and find out more?
Well, Kelly, what happened? By the way, I love you. You just opened up so many doors for me when you were back with another network and all kinds of different things.
You can say
Your
Fox, it's
film,
okay.
noble desire and and everything else. You've been an inspiration to me. But I just want to say that uh, what happened is that they we just developed such a rapport over that time. And then they asked me questions like, what did Jesus look like, and what part did people of African descent play in biblical and extra biblical literature and history and all the rest. And I just didn't have a clue. And so if my wife were here, she'd tell you this is all pre-digital. So I had to go to the library and get out those big old VHS tapes and Eyes on the Prize Part One, Eyes on the Prize Part Two, Africa: A Voyage of Discovery by Basil Davidson. And then somehow I got to know a guy by the name of Ivan Van Sertima, who was at Rutgers at the time. He passed away in 2009. But once again, pre-digital. I got his home phone number somehow. I don't know how that happened. I called up. His wife Jacqueline answered, and I could hear her almost in a stage whisper, "I don't know who it is, but he wants to talk with you." And so he gets on the phone. We talked for. I said, Ivan, you don't know me. I barely know you. I said, but I'm hoping that you'll want to get to know me because I know I want to get to know you. And so about 45 minutes later, he says, Joel, what's your home address? And I told him. Little did I realize, 3 weeks later, I get this big box of books because he did over 30 volumes of literature
Wow. Wow.
about they came before Columbus and Egypt revisited, and about the Moors and
Yeah.
black presence in Asia, and all these different books, the Olmec Empire, and all these different things. And so I got these books, and I tell you, when I'm reading a book and I'm really reading it, I will talk back to the author. I'll say, I don't agree with that, or hey, great point. Or maybe three chapters later, oh, now I realize what you said in chapter two. It's a foundation for what I'm learning in chapter four. So it's just one of those things that I called him later and I said, I've got some people in my life that are speaking into my life, but would you be my historical guide? He consented, and he allowed me to ricochet, whatever's ricocheting around my little pea brain. I could ask him, and he was so gracious and so kind to me, and that was really a big help and in informing my work in Black history.
So you went on to write a book, A White Man's Journey Through Black History. You went on to develop a book as well as a film called Return to Glory: The Stirring of the Black Man. And you had some NBA players work with you on that, as well as historians and men of renown. How did that happen? What did it do for you in understanding that you could tell this story and have it be appreciated not only by white Americans, but black Americans and people all over the world?
Kelly, I still don't know how or why or what. It's just something that has gripped me, and I found that it has. I did a talk show for 11 years, did TV for 6, and I've done a lot of man on the street interviews, and I've always been. You've heard the purpose-driven life. I live the curiosity-driven life, and uh, and so for some reason that curiosity has drawn me in this direction, and it's sponsored just a gazillion conversations with people. I What I do is a time management tool because a lot of people have called me. I've gotten threats. I've gotten all kinds of crazy stuff
Hmm.
over the years. I had one time there were like 12 doxing videos on YouTube, Joel Freeman destroyed, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And all kinds of names I've been called, and I just laugh it off. And when people have called in the past, I just let them rant, and then I just say, can I tell you something? Can I speak now? And they say yes. And I say, well, right at this moment, Jesus loves you. And I had people cursing and slamming the phone down, and that's how I handled most of that stuff. But it's just a situation where the Lord has opened up doors, and my time management tool is I put up a website called truth-centrism.com. And so when someone calls, I don't have to spend 2.5 hours with them. I just send them to that website or read one of my books, and that's my crap detector to see if that person is worth my time. And if they call back, then we can drill down to the specificity of the situation. Because when we
Yeah.
get specific, we can become terrific. And
I
that's
like that.
been the way I've
Yeah.
dealt with it.
Getting specific to become terrific, and you have a great vast array of memorabilia and artifacts from Black history through the years. It's been featured at the United Nations, where it was on exhibit. What's next for you, Joel? What's your message to America and the world about people coming together regardless of race and politics?
One of the things that I'm doing right now is the Rosetta Stone project. And to me, that is germane to what you're asking, because it's all about problem solving. And I've identified somewhere between 8 and 10 categories of problems, and have developed a process with this word Rosetta, Rosetta, using the grand story of the Rosetta Stone, and then this process that is now trademarked to solve pretty much any problem within those 8 to 10 categories. And one of them is race relations. It is part of our human condition, and the only thing I know that takes care of it is the Jesus of the Bible. And
Yeah.
so that's what really compels me in everything I do. But I want to serve something up that is sticky, that is exciting, that's unique, that's built, that has jaw-dropping technology that will draw kids of all ages from K to Gray to want to be a problem solver, a solutionist, not just whine and moan about things.
You're an educator. For those who may not know what we're talking about with the Rosetta Stone, explain to them what the Rosetta Stone is and its significance.
Well, the Rosetta Stone was made in 196 BC, and here you see it kind of outlined this big picture. And it had 3 inscriptions on it, and there's a whole story behind that, which people can go to rosettacrazy.com to learn more about the history. But these 3 are reaching different stratas of society. So on the top is hieroglyphics, in the middle is demotic. We get the Greek word demos, democracy, the common people use this. It's a cursive form of hieroglyphics, same language but a different format. And then Greek, because Alexander the Great had conquered Egypt. Well, fast forward to 799 AD, and Napoleonic Egyptian military campaign. It was uncovered on the west bank of the Nile, and people have been looking all around at all the obelisks and the temples and everything. It looked like a kindergarten class had been let loose in all of Egypt, and with eyes and snakes and all kinds of suns and moons and everything else. And so what happened is that when they read the Greek, the last sentence, the last part of the Greek said that the same thing will be inscribed in all 3 inscriptions. And they said, oh my goodness, this will be easy peasy lemon squeezy. We know what the Greek says, and this should be very easy for us to figure it out. But when they hit the hieroglyphics, they didn't know if it was left to right, right to left, alphabetic, phonetic, symbolic, and they had no computer algorithms, no AI to do all the mind work, kind of trying to figure it out. And so it was a whole process. It took 23 years, filled with men and people with huge egos, diverse cultures, long periods of silence, no previous experience, and still they cracked the code. And that's the message. Someone working in a faith group, working in corporate America or anywhere in the world in the corporate setting, in a family system, a neighborhood association, whatever it is, the closer we get to the administrative center of any business, corporation, faith group, family system, the more opportunities there are for disillusionment and the more problems we identify. And so the whole idea here is to use this story, this grand epic drama, and then to transform this ancient artifact into a modern metaphor for problem solving and critical thinking. And God knows, every time I use GPS, my brain turns to mush just a little bit. Every time I use AI or Chat GPT or anything like that, it turns to mush just a little bit. And to imagine, you and I grew up in an era where we had to actually read a book and form an opinion. To have a whole generation growing up where you put in information and 10 seconds later you have a whole article for a magazine and don't have to go through the brain damage of figuring out what you're going to write. That is wonderful, but at the same time, it's dangerous, and I'm concerned.
Joel, I want to thank you for being with us, and I've got to go, but before I do, my final question is, what's your hope for America?
Oh, my goodness. Seek first to understand before seek to be understood. Seeking first to understand doesn't guarantee that one will be understood, nor does it preclude the need to be understood. It just means there's a chronological sequence. And I think that on social media, before commenting on something that has gripped the headlines on any given day, race-related or otherwise, before commenting, give at least 3 or 4 days, please, or maybe not comment at all. Don't feel the urge. And just that's my hope.
Joel Freeman, thank you for joining us, my friend. Appreciate you being on America's Hope.